Judaism, monotheism, polytheism, all the words, all the isms. Hey there, my 5 faithful listeners and anyone who randomly stumbled upon this episode. My name's Lydia, and this is the Lydia Todd Pod. It's probably not a good idea to start a podcast because your last name rhymes with pod, but I'm here anyways. From spontaneous trips to special guests to deep spiritual conversations and everything in between, expect inspiration, stories, and plenty of laughter. Grab a glass of milk, settle in, and let's dive into the episode. For the 5 of you listening today, I hope you're ready. Buckle in, because we are about to talk about something so random. But before we get into the topic, let me tell you about something that was crazy. So last week, or 2 weeks ago, whenever I last posted, I told you about going to Dishoom with Haley and how whenever we went there, a guy spilled his drink on me. We got a free meal out of it. Well, crazy enough, I went back to Dishoom this past week with Kaylee and her mom because her mom is visiting right now. They'd never been to the restaurant. I was like, yeah, we can go. So we went to Dishoom before going to see a play. While we're in line to go into Dishoom, because the line was so long, it was like a 30-minute to an hour wait. While we're in line, there's a guy in front of us from Erie, Pennsylvania, and he just starts chatting us up. He's asking about how London is. He is on here for vacation. We get to know each other. His name's Stefan. He's really nice. It was great to meet another American and just catch up. And we talked to him the whole time in line. So we get to where we're going to be seated. We say goodbye to him. We're sitting down, eating our meal. At the very end of the meal, Stefan comes by our table and is like, hope you girls have a lovely evening, or something along those lines. Then he goes up the staircase. As he's walking out, we can still see him from afar, but he's too far away to reach. As he walks out, his waiter comes up to our table and says, your meal has been paid for. And Kaylee and I are like, you're joking. No way. Are you serious? Man, Stefan paid for our meal. How does this keep happening? I mean, I'm not sad that it's happened. Definitely not sad. But how? This is crazy. I have never had to pay for a meal at Dishoom. You know, I like this streak. Hopefully I'll keep it up. But I just wanted to tell you guys what happened. That was so wild. Whenever the guy told us, we were in disbelief. So the rest of the time we're eating our meal, Kaylee and I cannot stop looking at each other and smiling. Every bite is pure joy because we're like, wow, there are nice people in this world like Stefan who just make people's day. So thank you, Stefan. Giving you a shout out on my podcast. Hey, if anyone else wants a shout out on the podcast, just go buy my meal at Dishoom. I'll talk about you next week. Let's get into the topic for today. Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism? Huh? The 5 of you may be wondering, Lydia, where have you been the last few weeks? Why haven't you posted an episode? And there are a couple reasons. One is that I just finished today my finals for my 2nd semester of grad school, and the last few weeks have been packed full of ministry-related things and school assignments and works and stuff. So that has been filling up my time, but also as one does, the next step in my faith episodes has been, we talked about, is there a creator? Is there evidence for God? And now that we have kind of established some ample evidence for God, I wanted to move on to the Bible, but there's actually an in-between topic where you decide if there's one or many gods. And that's something I really hadn't done much research on before. So I was very interested to see where it led me. Well, it started with Occam's razor, which is the idea that whenever you are making assumptions about a particular topic that maybe you don't know the answer to, you choose the path with the least assumptions. So a lot of people use Occam's razor to decide that they only believe in one God versus a pantheon of gods. After doing a lot of research on that, I felt like Occam's razor was a very weak argument for why there's only one God, because I think it takes just as many assumptions to assume that there's one God that's powerful enough to do all of the things as it does to assume that there's one God per thing. So, for instance, one God that's all powerful, one God that's all knowing, one God that's all etc., etc., one God that is all love, one God that's all just. I could be convinced otherwise, but for now, I'm tabling the Occam's razor argument for monotheism because there seems to be a lot of holes in the argument. So, that led me to do more research on monotheism and polytheism, and I'll talk more at the end of this episode about why I am not going to do further episodes on this topic, or why I don't think it's necessary to, but during my research, I came across this other side topic, and whenever I find something that's really interesting, I just kind of chase the rabbit hole. And so for the past 2 or 3 weeks, I've been researching, and just a few days ago, I read a 300-page academic article, research paper on Zoroastrianism. Am I saying that right? I have no idea. It's mostly practiced by Indians today, people from India, but it is sometimes claimed to be the oldest monotheistic religion in the world. That piqued my interest because I assumed that Judaism was, and I think that that would prove slightly problematic if there was a monotheistic religion that appeared before Judaism. Although not completely problematic, because before the time of Abraham, God mostly worked within family units and there wasn't an organized nationwide religion. But nonetheless, I went down this wild adventure of Zoroastrianism, so I'm going to tell you all about it. If you already know a lot about Zoroastrianism, good for you. I am very proud of you for knowing about this really random side topic. You're going to do really well in trivia competitions. And if you don't know anything about it, then you're in the same boat that I was a few weeks ago. I will cite most of my sources down below. You can always send me a DM and I will give you all of the resources that I used. First, let's give a background to the religion of Zoroastrianism. It is an ancient Iranian religion which, depending on who you ask, was established sometime between 2000 BC and 1400 BC. There's really not any concrete evidence as to when, but we know that by the time that Zoroaster lived, who is what the religion is named after, by the time he was alive, it was already a common belief of different things, and then he steered the religion in a new direction of beliefs, and he was kind of considered a main prophet for the religion, and he taught and created a lot of the ideas that are still in the religion to this day. It's a renowned Persian religion. It was the official religion of the Persian Empire. The god that they worship is named Ahura Mazda, which is the main god. They do actually believe, and I found this interesting because whenever people refer to them as the first monotheistic religion, they don't mean that they only believe in one god, but that they believe in one god that's more powerful than all the other gods. So they do believe in multiple gods and a pantheon of gods, but there's one that is the supreme god above other gods called Ahura Mazda. Zarathustra or Zoroaster, depending on where you look at, he is the main prophet who changed or established a lot of the beliefs of this religion. A lot of scholars think that he was alive in around 1200 BC. I'm giving a guesstimate because every source that I looked at had different dates. Some scholars think 1500 BC, some think 1200 BC, some think even later. But in the Zoroastrianism religious text, in one of their texts called Buddhism, which is not to be confused with Buddhism, Buddhism, it says in that text that Zarathustra lived 258 years before the defeat of the Persian Empire, which was around 350 BC, meaning that Zarathustra would have started his writings or teachings around 588 BC, and that's the latest dating of Zarathustra that I read. Most scholars don't have him dated anywhere later in history than the 600s BC. So I took a good medium, 1200 BC, for what I could tell. The reason for this is that most of what are referred to as Zarathustra's teachings and writings were not actually recorded until long after he was gone. This religion represents one of the first attempts to unify under the worship of one supreme God against the polytheistic religions of its time when they were surrounded by the Greek and Latin and Indian other religions. Zarathustra was said to point to Ahura Mazda as the one God that all should be under. The religion basically has a very familiar structure. It is based on good versus evil. Ahura Mazda is the good, and then there are evil things. There are evil spirits. There are things that are created evil, and the whole fight on earth is between good and evil. There are no reliable sources that predate Zarathustra himself about this religion, and so everything that is about this Iranian religion before Zarathustra is studied indirectly based on other documents, later documents, and a comparative approach of seeing what the people created in their art, what did they create in their pottery, and other things like that. If you are a believer of the Bible, then this religion is relevant because Darius the First worshipped Ahura Mazda, who is a key player in the book of Daniel. So by the time that the Persian Empire was ruling and the Jews were in captivity to them, the Iranian religion of Zoroastrianism was the dominant religion of the time there. That's kind of why there's this confusion of, did the Jews get their ideas for their established religion from Zoroastrianism when they were in captivity? That's the idea that's being thrown around. In the Zoroastrian religion, there are teachings about creation, teachings about resurrection, about dualism, so having body versus spirit. There are teachings about hell, or a place that wicked people go when they die. So there's lots of similarities between the religions. So it is easy to see how someone going back through history might say, wow, look, the Jews were taken into captivity by these people. The dominant religion affected Judaism and their teachings, and so in their writings they started to develop their own views of the same ideas, such as hell and dualism and resurrection from the dead. And the main reason for these beliefs is that most of our copies of Jewish writings and writings from Zoroastrianism don't come until much later. A lot of our copies of the Old Testament are dated as early as the time of captivity, but there are few documents that mention things like hell or dualism before that time. Another point of contention is the story of Genesis. in creation, where in 6 days God creates all of the things on the earth. There's a lot of similarities in the Zoroastrian story of creation. So you come to Zoroastrianism and Judaism, and how do you know which one came first? That's the question. Zoroastrian teachings are recorded in what's called the Avesta, which is practically their Bible. It was originally handed down orally between Zoroastrian believers and priests for more than 1,000 years. And when it was finally written down, it was for the first time written in about the 3rd century AD. Whenever they first recorded it, they created a special alphabet to record the traditional pronunciation of what they were orally passing down. Moses would have predated Zarathustra by about 400 years, but that isn't firm evidence that Judaism came first, because the writings that we have that are attributed to Moses, the physical copies that we have, are not dated that far back. If Zarathustra lived as early as 1200 BC, which is the date that I'm going with based on what the average of most scholars say, then that means that there's a 1400-year gap between Zarathustra and when his writings were actually recorded and written in around the 300s AD. That would be the same as if people believed Muhammad's teachings from AD 600, whenever he was alive, until now, but it would be like the Quran being written today, right now. That is kind of crazy, because who knows how much the Zoroastrian religion has changed since Zarathustra actually lived. It's hard to decipher what stage of the Zoroastrian religion that a lot of these ideas came to life, if it was before or after certain events or times in history. There are about 5 different stages of the Zoroastrian religion, the very first being less monotheistic, more of a polytheistic religion, the second being when Zarathustra lived and was a prophet and taught different teachings. There's when the emperors from Cyrus the Great to Alexander were holding Zoroastrianism as the official religion of Persia. And at that period, we at least have some tangible evidence and datable inscriptions. And then there's the later Zoroastrianism that threw out a lot of what Zoroaster taught in the earlier stages. And so it becomes way more about multiple deities and mythological elements. They revert back to the predated version of the religion. And so in later Zoroastrianism, you have a change in a lot of the teachings, and then you have a 5th wave, which may or may not be related to Zoroastrianism, which is the religion of the Magi. I'm not really going to get into all of those, because for me what matters is which came first, and is there a way to know? Because it would place a lot of doubt in the Jewish text of the Bible if there was proof that all of the ideas of Judaism came from another monotheistic religion. That would kind of point to that other religion being more, trustworthy, or if it predated Judaism, then I would have more concern. So my question was, in all of this research, how do I know which one came first, or can we know? And I don't think that we can know based on the evidence. The Ketif Hinnom silver scroll amulets were from around 600 BC, and that is one of the earliest manuscripts we have of the book of Numbers. So we know that at least by the 600s BC, Moses' writings were well established and well taught. If you attribute Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy to being written by Moses, then you would have to assume that they were written much earlier than when Zoroastrianism became a monotheistic religion. In Isaiah 26, we read about resurrection, and that means that resurrection was taught before exile for the Jews, which means that at least the idea of resurrection did not come from Zoroastrianism. From all the claims that I have read about Zoroastrianism being the first monotheistic religion, I have yet to see any proof that Zoroastrianism can be proven to be dated as far back as before Moses, with the established ideas of monotheism, which weren't established in the religion until Zarathustra was alive. If anyone is still listening to this episode, thanks for hanging in with me. I know that this stuff seems really random, and I'm not sure if you're interested in this at all, but I thought it was really interesting. What is my conclusion on Zoroastrianism and its relation to Judaism, or what should I think about monotheism and polytheism? Well, I'm not sure that you can draw a conclusion as to which religion came first or which one is right based on just looking back in history. So my proposal to you is to explore the texts themselves. Explore what the Old Testament teaches. Explore what the religious texts of the Jews teach, and see, do those texts hold up to being true? Because ultimately, we're not just discovering history. We're trying to figure out which one of these religions is truly real. We want to know so that we can follow the truth. This isn't just about history. This is about finding out, is Ahura Mazda the true God, or is the God of the Jews the true God? If they both teach that and they're teaching different things, one of them is wrong, if not both. So the only way to figure that out, I think, is to read the text and examine them. Does the text of Judaism hold up against history? Are there fallacies in the text, contradictions in the text? What does archaeology and science and other things have to support or disprove the Old Testament of the Jews? For the Avesta, the same. Does the Avesta hold up against different things that it says about history, about science, about just general living? Are the things that it says true? And through those ways of examining both religions, I think you'll find out which one came first, because the one that came first will be the one that ultimately is the truth. For my own personal thoughts, whatever they're worth, I do think that it's very possible that Zarathustra was not just reforming a religion of polytheism, but he may have had some kind of experience that drew him to the true God. There's not really much I can know for sure, because he doesn't have any writings around from his personal experience. It's all stuff that was written thousands of years after. But the faith that he taught was based on Ahura Mazda, so this one true God being a single God who was all-powerful, all good, and completely loving. And this God required acknowledgement and wanted humans to express this acknowledgement through good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, and to live virtuous lives. Virtuous people would honor truth and repudiate lies. And that is what Zarathustra taught. In the Old Testament, while God had a special relationship with the Jews, he didn't neglect or forget about people who were of Gentile nations. Zarathustra would have been included in the Gentile nations, and often there were prophets that were sent to tell them to repent, to help them live a virtuous life. We know, at least from the story of Jonah, how God, he cared about nations who were living in sin and called them to repentance, even though they didn't have to follow all of the law of the Jews. They were just called to turn to him and to praise him and serve him in the ways that they knew, and how nature itself told them there's a God, and many of them chose to worship God, even though they weren't under the covenant of the Jews. It's very possible that Zarathustra was a person who had an experience with the God of the Jews and wanted to turn away from the polytheistic religion that his nation had been engulfed in for so long. This would make sense for another reason, because many of the times that God specifically sent out prophets or different messages to people, groups who were Gentile nations living in sin, it was when they had a direct interaction with the Jews. And Zarathustra came around the time that many of the Jews were in captivity or about to be taken into captivity. And so with him living around the same time as the captivity of the Jews with the Persian nations, it would make sense that God would send a message to them to help them turn to monotheism, let them recognize that there is only one true God. I'm not really sure exactly what Zarathustra followed or what he knew, but that's a possibility that's been tossed around in my head. Haven't read that anywhere. That's not something I can prove and not something you have to believe, but just throwing my idea out there. Abraham lived 2000, 2200-ish years BC, and if Judaism can be traced all the way back to Abraham at minimum, then you definitely have Judaism predating Zoroastrianism. So maybe I should have said that first. I don't think that there's any reason to think that Zoroastrianism came first in its monotheistic form. If you want to figure out, maybe you're considering, do I believe in a pantheon of gods or do I believe in one God? If you're considering that, I want to challenge you to give the text of the Bible a chance. I want you to test it and to see if what it says, what it claims, holds to be true against evidence. I'm going to be spending a lot of the next faith episodes going through different evidences for mostly the New Testament, but some throughout the whole Bible. So if you are curious, if you're still uncertain, you want to believe in God, you think that the evidence is strong enough for a creator, but you're not sure which one is the one, then go on this journey with me, going through the old law, going through the new law, going through the text of the Bible, and seeing if Judaism, seeing if Christianity ultimately is what it claims to be. I do think you will find the answer that you're looking for, mono versus polytheism, within exploring the text. We will start with that in our next faith episode. I hope you had a grand time exploring Zoroastrianism with me. I hope that even if you weren't interested, you at least learned a couple things. One of my favorite things from this research was learning more about the religion of the Persians during the time of captivity. I didn't know that Darius I and possibly Cyrus, although we're not sure if Cyrus was a follower of Ahura Mazda or if Cyrus just promoted it because it was the national religion and it united the people. I found it very interesting to learn about what Daniel would have had to deal with, the kind of religion that he would have been within while in captivity whenever he deals with Darius. Honestly, this is somehow related to the last deep discussions with Daniel episodes that we did, because we just went through the prophecies in Daniel. So it always comes back full circle. Don't know how that happens, but here we are. Zoroastrianism, Daniel, Ahura Mazda, Judaism, monotheism, polytheism, all the words, all the isms. As we wrap up this episode of the Lydia Todd Pod, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for you spending time with me. This really challenges my belief that I only have 5 consistent listeners. If you have any thoughts, topics, or questions you'd like me to explore further on future episodes, please reach out on one of my socials. I hope that our conversations have brought you inspiration and joy. If you have friends or family who might be interested in our conversations, don't hesitate to share the podcast with them.